If you want to write stories your readers will love, there are 3 things you need to do. Understand storytelling principles, see how other writers have applied those principles, and then use them in your own work. Here on the Story Nerd podcast, our goal is to demystify story theory. We'll help you with the first 2 steps so that you can get started with the third. I'm Melanie Hill, writer, editor, and poet, and I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
And I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish their books faster and without frustration.
On today's episode, Valerie pitched The Proposal so that we can study the hero's monologue. This 2009 film was directed by Anne Fletcher from a screenplay by Anne Fletcher and Pete Shirelli. Now, of course, there will be spoilers because we can't talk about the movie without talking about the movie. And please help other writers find our show by leaving a rating and review. For Apple Podcast listeners, you can do it right from your phone. Simply go to the show's landing page, scroll to the bottom, and there are the stars. It's that simple. All right, Valerie, how did you go this week with The Proposal?
Well, this is just a nice little break from the substance that we did last week. That was a bit heavy last week. I needed a lighter movie to study, Melanie. I'm not going to lie. I needed a break from the spookiness and the body horror and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I chose The Proposal, but also because I wanted to have as many different genres as possible, the widest possible variety of stories to study so that I could understand and that we all could understand the concept of the hero's monologue as best as possible. And let's be honest, The Proposal and The Substance are about as different as it gets. Now, that said, both movies deal with the hero's monologue in exactly the same way. See, this is why studying so many different genres is so important, because you wouldn't think, right, that the same technique would work in a body horror flick and in a rom-com, but it does. It absolutely does. Okay. The hero's monologue is all about the protagonist's why. Why do they want what they want? And what they want is called an object of desire. Why do they do what they do? Now, in The Proposal, Andrew goes along with Margaret's scheme because it suits his object of desire, right, which is to become an editor. Margaret is the antagonist, and Andrew is the protagonist. Yes, this is a two-hander. Absolutely. And yes, Sandra Bullock at the time was definitely a bigger star when this movie was filmed than Ryan Reynolds was. I think she's still superior, to be honest. I love Sandra Bullock. And yes, immigration is also, or the immigration officer or department is also an antagonist in the film. And yes, Andrew's father is also an antagonist. All that is true. But remember, everything in story exists in a hierarchy. And at the very top of the hierarchy is character. Even in plot-driven stories, character's still at the top. Because nobody cares about what's happening unless they care about who it's happening to. So within the category of character, the protagonist is at the very top. And in second place is the antagonist. So Margaret and Andrew are antagonistic to one another, absolutely. And they are both protagonists, absolutely. But since Andrew is the primary protagonist, Margaret then becomes the primary antagonist. I hope that makes sense. I think intuitively people who watch rom-coms get a feeling, sort of a natural feel that that's the case. But I just wanted to explain the theory behind it so that you knew why I was saying that Margaret is an antagonist. Okay. So at first, Andrew's object of desire is to become an editor. And the reason he goes along with Margaret's scheme, or his why, is because it enables him to get this object of desire to become an editor. So far, so good. We all know this to be true because at the 19-minute mark of the movie, it's explicitly stated for us. It's easy to fall into the trap of saying that Andrew is going along with this scheme because his boss is telling him to, that she's backed him into a corner and that she's threatening his job. That's not it, though. That's a very superficial interpretation, a superficial analysis. And this is a rom-com. It's not a super deep movie, but that's even too surfacey for even a rom-com. Like we need to sort of think a little bit deeper to understand what's happening here. The reason I'm saying that that's not his why is because it's the thing that gets him to the immigration office. It's not the thing. It's not strong enough to actually get him to go along with the whole scheme of bringing her to his home and introducing her to his family and his grandma and all that kind of stuff. It gets him to the immigration office in the first place. Great. But once he gets into that immigration office and realizes that there's a hefty fine and jail time involved, doing it because his boss told him to is not weighty enough anymore. It falls apart. It's not a strong enough why to carry the whole story. And at this point is when we get a little bit of a monologue, right? This is the scene on the sidewalk outside the immigration office. They're both standing there, and Andrew makes Margaret actually get down on one knee and propose. So Andrew says, I'm looking at a $250,000 fine and 5 years in jail. That changes things. Now, when Margaret refuses to give him a promotion and refuses to publish his manuscript, Andrew says, then I quit and you're screwed. Goodbye, Margaret. It really has been a little slice of heaven. Right? So if doing it because his boss had told him to do it was enough, this whole part of the movie wouldn't be happening, right? Now, at this point, Margaret knows that he has her over a barrel. Like, she's really stuck here. So she agrees to give him the promotion now, not in 2 years' time, and she promises to publish the manuscript with 20,000 copies first run, not 10,000. He gets her to do 20,000. So that feels like a hero's monologue, right? It feels like it's done and dusted, but it's not. It's tempting to think that that's what it is, but it's not. If you listen to last week's episode, you'll remember that I said that the protagonist doesn't always know their true why at the beginning of a story. They do have a reason for doing what they're doing, but it's not the deep, true reason that they only come to realize after they've gone on the journey. Okay? That's what happened in the substance. That's what's happening here in the proposal, which is really cool. So the hero's monologue, where Andrew states his true why, comes at 1 hour and 40 minutes into the movie. Now, this is when he realizes the true reason that he went along with Margaret's scheme, even when he had multiple opportunities to get out of it without a penalty. And his true why is because he loves her. And he didn't realize that he loved her until the very end. When he's lost her, right? That's when he realized that he loved her. And this is the famous scene that everybody talks about when they talk about this movie. Margaret has left Alaska. She has returned to New York City, and she's clearing out her office. And Andrew comes in, and he's all out of breath, and he's all sweaty. Not a sexy look, if you ask me, but apparently it works for people because everyone loves this scene. And he's out of breath because he has been running to get to the office to try to catch her before she's deported to Canada. I mean, seriously. So here it is. Here is the hero's monologue from the proposal. And of course, this is Andrew talking. He says, Margaret, stop talking. I want to say something. This'll just take a sec. 3 days ago, I loathed you. I used to dream about you getting hit by a cab or poisoned. Then we had our little adventure up in Alaska and things started to change. Things changed when we kissed. And when you told me about your tattoo, even when you checked me out when we were naked. But I didn't realize any of this until I was standing alone in a barn, wifeless. Now, you can imagine my disappointment when it suddenly dawned on me that the woman I love is about to get kicked out of the country. So, Margaret, marry me, because I'd like to date you. Ta-da! There it is. That is the hero's monologue. And that is the kind of monologue that makes a star. And it did make a star. Ryan Reynolds, honest to God, must have jumped for joy when he read that in the script when it was first delivered to him, because he knew that those last 10 words were going to catapult his career, right? So, Margaret, marry me because I'd like to date you. He knew audiences would fall in love with him when he said that. And boy, did they ever. That, my friends, is the power of the hero's monologue. Actors love them. Readers need them. Whether that's a reader of a novel or a reader of a screenplay, readers need them because we need to know why this character is going on this adventure. What's the whole purpose of this story that I'm about to read or I just read? All right, it's short and sweet, but there it is. All right, Melanie, how did you go with your study of the shadow this week?
Well, this is interesting. So when I first sat down last night to finish my script, I checked out our shared document, right? And I realized that you and I have a different view of who the protagonist is. Yes. So anyway, so when I see the movie or when I watch the movie, I see Margaret as the main character because she undergoes what I think is the most change in the movie. And this makes her more interesting to study in relation to the shadow this season. So I'm going to stick with her in my analysis because I think her shadow is far more interesting. So just so you know that's why I've stuck with Margaret this week.
I think her shadow is far more interesting.
Yes.
And like I said, it's a two-hander. They're both protagonists. So what would be interesting, an interesting exercise, some homework for our dear listeners, find Margaret's hero's monologue.
Yes. Well, then when I saw that, I did start to think about that and go, where is the hero's monologue? Is it this? Is it that? And it's not clear. So I get why you said what you said. I do understand that. So it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I found that interesting too. Yeah. All right. So this week's movie is a great example of what I've said in the past 2 episodes, that the shadow isn't always bad, right? That the shadows are the parts of a protagonist's personality that they don't want to show. Now, this actually shouldn't surprise us because The Proposal is a romance, and personal growth or arcs centered around characters maturing fit neatly into romances because characters have to open up and prove that they are worthy of love. That is a convention of this genre of story. So this is how it plays out for Margaret. She is fearless, but she is also afraid. Now, so an example of this, right, is that Margaret fired Bob without blinking. She lied to immigration officials. She lied to the managing directors of her publishing company. She blackmailed Andrew, and she made deals that no one else could. At work, she is fearless. However, she is also deeply afraid. She is afraid of water. She's afraid of love after losing her parents, and she's afraid of losing her career when she has to leave the US. Now, most of her fears are about the personal, not the professional. So her shadow is about the personal. Now, a love story is about emotion. It's about vulnerability and opening up to another person. So for Margaret to accept Andrew's genuine marriage proposal, her shadow isn't about becoming fearless about love. It's actually to be brave. So when I say brave, I mean that she needs to acknowledge her fear and then accept the emotions that she has for Andrew. And being brave is about feeling the fear and taking action anyway. It's very different from fearlessness, in my opinion. So what Andrew's family do is draw the personal to the surface. Gammy and Grace, so Andrew's grandmother and his mother, in particular, show Margaret what acceptance and love can be. Gammy by being spiritual and superstitious, and Grace by being accepting of Margaret and trying to keep her family together. Joe, Andrew's father, however, represents one of the two, I think, cautionary paths that Margaret could follow. So Joe is one of the characters who is a bit more shadow-like than the other two characters. So Joe is unaccepting. He is critical of Andrew's career choice, and he is without empathy for his son. And while Joe isn't alone, that he is married to Grace, that's what I mean, he risks his relationship with Andrew because he is focused on what he wants, not what Andrew wants. And Margaret is very similar. Now, the other cast member who is a cautionary tale or who is a cautionary example for Margaret, I think, is Gertrude. Andrew asked Gertrude to elope to New York, but she didn't go because she couldn't imagine life away from Sitka. So Gertrude didn't want to change despite loving Andrew, and she symbolizes what could happen if Margaret doesn't change, or if Margaret keeps making the same decisions that she's always made. And then there's also Ramon. And while he is comic relief in the movie, I have a feeling that he is actually a subtext warning for Margaret, and that Ramon is an example of what could be left, or all that's left, if Margaret doesn't make different choices. So I'm just going to put that out there as food for thought. Anyway, the point where Margaret's shadow starts to surface is when she tells Andrew personal things about her. So there's a point in the story where she tells him a lot about her personal life. So, for example, and this is an edited quote, I don't like flowers in the house because they remind me of funerals. I never played video games. I read Wuthering Heights every Christmas. It's my favorite book. I haven't slept with a man in over a year and a half. I went to the bathroom and cried after Bob called me a poisonous bitch. And the bird tattoo, they're swallows. I got them when I was 16 after my parents died. Now, this is important because Andrew is Margaret's personal assistant and he doesn't know anything personal about her. In fact, he calls her Satan's mistress to his family. But from this point onwards, after Margaret tells him these things, her shadow starts to surface more and more often. And once it's out, she can't pull it back in. But the first time the fully integrated Margaret is revealed is during the wedding scene, when she decides she should be honest and take the hit of being deported. And then in front of Andrew's family and friends, she says, and I quote, "I knew that if I threatened to destroy his career, he'd do just about anything. So I blackmailed him. And I thought it would be easy to watch him do it, but it wasn't. Turns out it's not so easy to ruin someone's life when you find out how wonderful they are." End quote. So now her decision here is personal, but what's at risk is her career. Margaret decides to sacrifice her career to be honest and to show vulnerability. But it's later, when she's packing up her office in the US and Andrew proposes, again, for real this time, that she has a choice to be brave or to go back to being fearless. And she chooses brave. Well, I think she sort of chooses brave, but that's what the makers want us to believe. I actually personally think that Margaret chooses mediocre. But, oh dear, because here I'm going to point out some things that I find problematic. Andrew might be good looking, but I don't think he's that wonderful. He fills Margaret up twice in public because he can, and there aren't any ramifications for him. He knowingly calls her Satan's mistress and bitches about her to his work colleagues. And at the end of the movie, someone calls out, "That's it, Andrew, show her who's boss." Anyway, despite its problems, The Proposal is a really good example of how shadows aren't always bad personality traits. Shadows are what characters hide away from the world. They stop the character from being a whole person, and your job as a writer is to help reveal or help your character reveal their shadow and integrate that part of their character so that they become a better version of themselves. All right, Valerie, what's today's action step?
All right, I want everyone to take a really close look at the hero's monologue in your own story and ask yourself, is this the kind of monologue that a star would deliver? Because whether your book gets made into a movie or not is beside the point. Your protagonist is the star of your story. So the monologue must be worthy of her.
All right, that wraps it up for this week. Join us again next week when we discuss another good feeling movie, The Incredibles. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. For more information about our online training, visit storynerd.ca/courses. To join Valerie's Inner Circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. And for tips about books to help you read like a writer, visit me at melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory doesn't have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.